it's a gamble.
Yeah, if he shows up, he shows up. If he doesn't, yeah. It would be nice to continue his talk.
It was about
Mm-hmm.
kufr. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين اللهم صل على محمد. So before I start, I'm gonna share the link and then we'll get in the yap session. The hadith, inshallah. And I actually like these hadiths. It's if you guys saw, it's specific to Imam Ali because of his Bilal coming up.
Is it still the same topic or is it a new topic?
The hadith, yeah, it's a different topic. Because the one who asked about anxiety was me actually. So once I got the answer, I was like, you know what, we're gonna have to ask him. Oh boy. And if you guys saw, it's specific to Imam Ali. Where is he coming from? Because of his Bilal. Oh, it's coming from here. Yeah, it's working. Let me just.
He's not moving.
Suri, guys, Suri.
Got it.
Yeah, I'm just fixing it so it doesn't echo because of that. Hello, hello. How is everybody's week going?
It went well. It flew by, honestly. I felt like it.
School got to start for us. The colleagues, so we're cooked. So, alright. So, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, first of all. And then, I hope everybody's doing well. Thank you for everybody coming. And then, I believe there's going to be more people that said they're going to show up, inshallah. I wanted to start it off with the hadith like we always do, weekly hadith. And two of them caught my eye, and I just wanted to talk about it. And then we can talk about it for like 15, 20 minutes, inshallah. So the first one is they're both from Imam Ali, and they're both from Nahj al-Balagha. The first one goes, one who neither grieves past losses nor is overjoyed by the possession he is granted in the future has perfected his as what is that? Asceticism.
Asceticism.
Asceticism from both sides.
So it's one who neither grieves past losses nor is overjoyed by the possessions he is granted in the future has perfected his asceticism from both sides.
So yeah, I really like this hadith because it kind of talks about like, well, I liked it in a sense. It made me like think, like, what does it mean? Because I get like part of it, but then the other part, like, I'm kind of confused. Like, so is he saying that to forget about the past almost, and then move on? Like, I'm not really picking up.
Sounds like don't let it impact you.
Yes.
I feel like it's saying that the one who doesn't let it influence them or impact them, who grieves past because when you're grieving, you're like expressing some type of distraught or like being bothered by something that happened to you in the past.
But then isn't that like, I feel like that's something, a human nature, like something that you're supposed to do to become a human, to grow,
Yeah,
to progress as a human.
to feel
To go through pain, grief is a way of learning, I feel like.
no, I don't think that's saying anything. I think it's not. It's not talking about grieving in general. It's talking about past.
The past, but like, that's the thing, like, you're thinking about your past, and then
I think that's the idea. Don't think too much.
Also, it feels like keeping part of it feels like keeping your emotions.
Yeah.
Don't be overjoyed by it.
Yeah.
Because
express, I guess.
No, it's detachment.
Detachment.
You're detached from your future and your past. Your past goals and your future success. So it's like you're above those things. And anything that comes your way in the future, you're not like impacted by it. In the past, all these things, and it's because you have like it's I think what it's about is like you have like such a devotion for like God that everything that happens doesn't really hit you
Makes you
because
react in a certain
it
way.
doesn't. Yeah, you don't react because like the devotion makes you that it's like nothing.
You're focused.
It's basically nothing. The,
Grand scheme of
in the
things.
grand, yeah,
Like living in the present.
like in the grandness
Yeah.
of God, like anything that comes your way,
But shouldn't like you be aware of your past?
No, yes, be aware of your past. It's not. It's about reacting. It's about how you
Reacting
act
to.
and your perspective. So the way you think about it. So the idea of not being overly attached,
Hmm.
and then how you react to things that come your way. So
not just being overly
you can
Okay.
be very
Oh.
emotional
detached,
and be it. Yeah.
be completely detached.
I don't think you can be completely detached. I
Yeah,
think
then
there is a
wouldn't
balance.
being completely detached be like stoic?
Over, but not. Yeah. I think
So
it's,
it's not completely cutting off your attachment or your emotions, just either keeping it in check or to some extent detaching.
yeah, because you still have to exist in this world. You still have to
Hmm.
feel. It's
Well,
not.
I mean, you
It's
can
not like.
feel.
Hmm?
You can feel.
You can feel,
Like
but it's
anything
saying
happen,
don't be overjoyed. Don't
It's
have
about
like
the reaction to these
overly
things.
emotions.
but it is about like
Tempering your reactions.
yeah, maybe temper your reaction and your
Yeah, yeah.
so like stoic in that sense.
Yeah,
That's what I was
not that
gonna say.
extreme.
Would
I
someone
think,
be
yeah,
a stoic?
stoicism. He's talking a little bit about nirvana in terms of like complete detachment from
Yeah. I think
material.
stoicism is a little different. Stoicism is like you don't let it move you, but it's not because of like a devotion to God. It's more like the belief that which you can't change or anything that's out of your
Mm.
control, you should let it affect you.
Yeah,
That's a little different though. It's like that's kind of stifling religious basis. It's more like stifling your growth, whereas this one is about like it's about like
I think it's somewhere in between both, probably.
stoicism.
Complete detachment. Complete detachment from material world. I don't. That's not encouraged. There's no monasticism in Islam.
I think the main point is that it's that balance.
Yeah,
It's that balance between detaching from this dunya, this physical
completely,
world,
and then
and the balance between like you exist in this world. This world is your test, but there's also the dunya after. That well, is it's not. It's not about not being active. It's about the emotional aspect,
yeah.
your ego that's in the way of like your engagement with it. Because there's like a difference between the self and the ego. Like this aspect of like your joy or your feeling that stems from the ego.
Yeah, I think that's just a particular perspective. So, I don't. Yeah. So, Islamically, the idea of the psyche and the nafs that takes it and pulls it in certain ways, I think it's important to keep in mind in terms of النفس اللوامة, النفس الأمارة بالسوء, النفس المطمئنة. So there are psychological states that the Quran talks about um, that your self expresses, and I think that's important to keep in mind. When the Imam is talking about uh, these being overjoyed or being grieved about situations, I think it goes the balance. I think that's the whole being balanced in your reactions and to the events and circumstances that happen to you in this world.
Mm.
You know, the dunya, because it's about how you, because the whole thing is about how you, what are you gonna do in this life in this dunya, and
How are you you're gonna react to
Yeah.
things and how you're gonna.
So what is religion?
What are
What
your
are these
actions?
advices all about? It's
Yeah.
all about how you should live while you're here, so you can have a good life here and a good one next life. You know?
Yeah. Speaking of which, the second hadith, it's like I think it's kind of related. Imam Ali says in his 190-second sermon, he says, God tests his worshippers with many different hardships. He makes them engage in different struggles, and he makes them undergo multiple misfortunes, all in order to extract arrogance from their hearts and establish humbleness in their souls. So, kind of like putting you through a test and seeing how you act, how you react to it. Well, not
That's
seeing, but
interesting.
like you want to.
There's a verse in the Quran where I don't know the exact verse in Arabic, but God says that do the believers think that they can call themselves believers without being tested?
Yeah,
And I think comes from
exactly.
that same idea that to make a claim and for it to have a certain meaning, it,
It has to be
you
tested.
it has to be tested.
When you mean tested, like you mean like some type of like worldly suffering.
I think
I don't think
It wouldn't be suffering. It could be
not
like
specific.
yeah, I guess
it could be anything. Like
yeah,
In the
suffering.
context of the second hadith, though,
In the
it seems
context-
like it.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, he's talking about suffering.
So like, what is it to like pass the test? Is it just to recognize that like in the grandeur
Mhm.
of
The
Allah?
idea is that suffering, you can overcome the idea of suffering.
Okay, just like
It
the
also- it
anxiety
also
hadith last,
says-
Yeah.
last week. Okay.
So it goes both ways.
Somehow
So
we run
it
that
either
back.
you overcome the challenges, or I think like the
You
hadith said,
lose.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala extracts arrogance.
Yes.
That's the whole idea.
Only
So
to
you,
humble you out. So it's kind of like either you overcome that challenge, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like
it's
dealt
interesting.
with it and you stay detached and stay humble,
Mhm.
or arrogance is extracted from you, then you are humble.
So you go through the events and then
You're
you.
forced. Are you talking about being humbled? Like, God is going to humble you because of how arrogant you were?
In some way.
Interesting.
I think that's
Yeah.
what he said, right?
And then
Read it out
To-
again.
okay. He said God tests his worshippers with many different hardships. He makes them engage in different struggles, and he makes them undergo multiple misfortunes, all in order to extract arrogance from their hearts.
So the goal is for arrogance to be
To-
removed.
Yes, and to be humble,
Replacing
and to
arrogance with
replace
humble.
it.
Being humble.
Replace arrogance with humble.
That's interesting.
I
So,
mean,
yeah.
this is a very old
Mhm.
the story of Jah.
Mm.
Apparently, it's like over 4,000 years old.
Mhm.
That's what it's about.
Can you tell us what the story of Job is?
Job is tested
Yeah.
by God. About him testing his faith, taking away. Was he the one that At the
Oh,
end, he
was
gives
given
him
the
affliction? Like
Mhm.
his home was burned, and he lost his children, and then he was afflicted.
And the interesting thing is
And his
that
wife. His wife was
the role of Satan is actually the interesting part for me, where like it occurs through dialogue between God and Satan, where Satan's like, the only reason he worships you is because he has all these things, and it kind of takes you back to if he didn't have all these things, he wouldn't
Yeah.
worship you.
So the role of God is like a parent trying to feed his child through affliction. He takes away something from him, then he gets better that way. It makes sense, but it was also to prove a point to Shaitan. In that story, it was to prove a point to Shaitan. That's when I said, okay, I will test him, I will show you. And he will stay loyal.
And to us, I think that the story
To us primarily,
to
of
us
course.
as
But
readers.
in that moment, historically, when it
Yeah.
occurred, part of it was to prove a point to Shaitan. You're wrong.
Is there reference to the story of Job in the Quran?
Same
Yeah,
kind of similar
his
story.
name is Ayub.
Yeah,
in
Ayub.
Arabic.
It's slightly different, but it's pretty much the same story.
Oh, well, then I have a question. If you're gonna kind of sidetrack me. So in the story of Job, as I know it, like in the Old Testament, it is said that all these afflictions occur, and there's kind of like a why me moment from Job.
No, that doesn't happen.
So
Job
so
never questions
No.
why
Yeah,
that's happening to him.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Is there a moment?
most of the stories of the prophets.
We hold
I-
up the
I-
idea of infallibility very strongly, very different
So,
than the
so
Old
for us, all the
Old
prophets
Testament.
are infallible.
So, like for example, Noah getting drunk and doing crazy things, that doesn't
Yeah.
happen. That's not.
Okay.
We believe these are like made up ideas that these are infallibility for all prophets.
Well, is there a moment in the Quran story of Job where God like shows Job the universe
I'm not
in
sure
like
about
a
that.
picture of creation? Oh, interesting.
Are you talking like in the he has a experience?
Yeah,
I'm
so,
not sure about that.
Oh,
I
wow.
don't think so.
It might be in Hadith.
Yeah.
I don't remember that honestly.
No, that's interesting because it fixes like a major plot hole with the Old Testament Job because it's like we know that the reason why God is doing this to Job is because he's made this deal with Satan
Mhm.
to show Satan something.
Yeah.
But when Job asks why to God, God he shows him like the creation of the universe and basically says like, who are you to ask questions of me? But
Interesting.
it's like a paradox in the Old Testament,
Yeah,
and that
it is.
we know why. It's because he's trying to show Satan. It's
Yeah.
not that
It's not this big ambiguous
Yeah.
mystery.
the reader knows exactly why
Yeah.
this is happening. Yeah, yeah. Okay.
No, it doesn't have that. In
That's a I think that's like stories are almost entirely similar except in the statement that our
Yeah.
prophets are infallible. There's a difference.
Every
but-
prophet.
every
prophet.
prophet.
Yeah. So, but I think there should be clarification. So, a prophet can make a mistake that's
Yeah.
not a sin, but that doesn't make him not infallible. He's still infallible because he's sinless. He will never commit a sin.
He can commit sin. Like actually today in Salat al-Jum'ah, Sayyid was mentioning the verse about Yusuf when he was in the
Oh,
presence
yeah.
of Zulayka.
Oh, like he was tempted almost?
He was tempted and he was about to.
And he like prayed to
And
God.
then no, God showed him something. Burhan Rabbih.
And then he ran through like the
And then
doors.
he was like, oh, I gotta get out of here.
Yeah, I read that. Yeah.
Yeah.
In the Quran, it's
In the
Quran,
big,
Lola Burhan
the
Rabbih.
today's
So Allah Burhan is. We can get into the details of the Burhan, but he was shown something, and he was like, oh, I gotta get out.
yeah, the Sayyid said today in the Jummah khutbah about it being from the Quran
Mhm.
that he was almost tempted, but then Allah showed him the way.
Of course, like the prophets are human.
Yeah.
So
They're-
there are they
Oh,
do
of
have
course.
basic temptations.
And it's funny in the
But all of them are, I think, sinless as in they've never actually committed.
sin, yeah. Especially Noah. The things in the Old Testament about Noah.
Very insane.
What's the thing about Adam?
Adam
The
and
story.
yeah, if he was gonna eat the apple anyway,
Oh yeah,
So
I think that's
some,
the
I
idea.
think
It's
a lot
not
of
a sin.
Muslims have some different views, possibly. I don't know them.
Yeah.
We did disobey direct order.
Yes.
So then how do you classify a sin? If that was to be true, I'm not saying it is.
I don't think that's considered.
Is there an
because-
original?
This is
Well, if you're
No, no
disobeying
original
God,
sin,
I mean,
yeah.
that's
because this is the nature of I think the initial creation. Adam was
so. What do you mean by sin?
because I think sins are just something that's specifically done, forbidden by God.
If you're
certain
saying
organized
Oh, you
manner.
found it?
if you're saying
Yeah, probably.
Adam disobeyed God,
Oh, have you been touched?
That's pretty clear.
I think it also has to do with
Oh, okay.
because
There you go.
because Adam was
Thank you.
deceived by Satan.
So, can you read that?
Yeah, sure.
So this is related to Prophet Job. It says, and remember when Job cried out to his Lord, I've been touched with adversity. You are the most merciful of the merciful. So he answered his prayer and removed his adversity and gave him back his family, twice as many, as a mercy from us and a lesson for the devoted worshippers.
Yeah. So it's not that he necessarily like questioned his condition. He was just like, I can't handle it. Like mercy. Like, when you're playing that girl Mercy, he's literally saying, you are the merciful. Mercy, mercy. I can't take it
He's
anymore.
calling upon Allah. Like,
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
praising his attributes of like him being merciful. But he's
Yeah.
not saying like, why are you doing this?
No, he's not. He's saying, like, I can't do this anymore.
You are the all merciful.
Yeah. Please give me some of that mercy.
And that way, Job like he stays faithful
Yes.
the entire time.
Yes.
that's good.
For years, it's actually like a pretty interesting story because I think his wife is also very faithful, like, regardless of all this afflictions. She's loyal to him and to God. She cares for him despite he lost his wealth, he lost his almost his entire. I think it was
All his wives?
I don't know
I'm
about
pretty
any
sure
of
one
his
of his
wives.
wives left.
Yeah, I think in the Quran,
One of them
wives,
was like-
yeah. He loses everything. I think his wife loses. he stays faithful. He stays secure in his
Iman.
yeah. He stays secure in his
Iman, yeah,
relationship with
yeah.
God. No, his relationship with God stays secure.
Yes, Iman is good.
Good. So now we'll be moving into the next
All
segment,
right.
inshallah, with Brother Muhammad Shah.
Wow.
What question is it today?
Who am I?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, we addressed where am I now.
Yeah, we talked about where am I last week. Now we're gonna be talking about who. Oh, yeah, here. All right, assalamu alaikum, everybody.
Walaikum salam.
Thank you all for coming. Um, before we start, I would like to ask everybody if we can recite a Surah Al-Fatiha for the people who have, the marhumin, and for the people to forgot to raise the affliction on the people in Palestine, and Sudan, and Yemen, and all across the world. In California, they're going through these wildfires. It's really tough. So we ask for God to send His mercy on all of His people and all His worshippers. And today we're going to be going back on topic in regards to our uh, four-part series, I guess, in regards to understanding immigration and citizenship and how it impacts us personally, and to understand these ideas and for us to think about them. I know immigration and citizenship is a hot topic now, and I think it's important for us to have a good understanding of these ideas. Um, so last week and the week before, we were talking about where am I, and what does that entail? So location and borders, countries, um, and then today we're going to be talking about who am I. I think a good place to start here is just like maybe the Islamic understanding of who am I in a very simple sense, where we kind of touched on it earlier when we talked about nefs. Um, I would like to maybe create kind of like a diagram, um, sorry, and and then we're gonna build on top of this. So we are here. We have the soul. We have the mind. We have uh, uh, no nafs, psyche, the nafs, aql, ruh, and the last part is the body. It's the jasad, right? And so this is the Islamic ontological understanding of the human in terms of who you are. You have the soul. This is something that is from Amrillah. We don't really have a lot of information about what the soul is. Um, we have the mind, the rational aspect of the human, the intellect, and then we have the psyche, the nafs. This is the personality. I would character of a person, who you are, the thing that makes you different from most other people. Because the idea is that the soul and the aql is shared across humans, that we all have minds and souls. Our psyche is what differentiates us. And then we have different bodies as well. Um, and I kind of want to build on that, right? We have this like spiritual understanding of who we are. Yeah, go ahead.
What's the box on?
The box is what we're going to build on top of.
On top?
Yes. No, I guess this is the box. The body is the box, and then there's the things that happen outside. So that's what I'm saying. It's like the spiritual, religious, ontological idea of who we are. No, it's going to be outside.
Yeah, brother.
I understand our soul is kind of like I understand what the soul is. The mind is, I guess, a way of thinking,
Aqil. So aqil is
like the brain and
it's the intelligence, the intellect, the ability to rationalize.
right. So that's how it senses.
Yeah, I guess that's a good way to think about it.
How would you define nefs?
Nefs is like the personality, the thing, their character, the thing that makes you different than your friend. You know, your psyche, your um, we talked about nafs al-lawama, like your habits and proclivities. I believe that's how you pronounce proclivities in terms of what you do. So you have a nafs that takes you certain ways. It's a character. Okay,
So kind of like
it's who you are. What's your name? Hashim. Who are you, Hashim?
putting you on the spot.
Yeah, it's the best way to learn. So like, who are you? Who is Hashim?
Passion.
But who is Hashim?
What? What?
Like, what makes Hashim different than Muhammad? Who is Hashim?
The home he grew up in. Wait, where he grew up in specifically, the family he was raised with. Like where you from?
Who you are?
We might have those things.
But like, do you like steak or chicken? Okay, I prefer steak. Do you like spicy food? Okay. Do you what's your favorite pastime?
Uh, if he's around people.
Okay, and what's your like um favorite book?
Uh, what about
Quran.
Like he's taking a long one.
That's a given.
So I should give. There's an alert on this. It says just 2 more minutes.
Oh no, no, that's fine.
Oh, okay. No,
Yeah,
I
that's
just
fine anyway.
so the idea of this being who you are and like also what you would do. Like what do you study? What do you do? Your profession?
USF student, biomedical science.
Biomedical science. So that's something you like. You like medicine. You like biology. Those are things that you are attracted
So
to.
it's a culmination of all things, like all our like aspects of ourselves.
Yeah, the other way to think about it is your id, it's your ego, it's all of those put together. It's your subconscious, it's your conscience, awareness of your things that you like, and the subconscious as well,
So why is there a distinction between mind and psyche?
because they're distinct things.
But if you said psyche is also the consciousness and the subconscious,
Yes. So what is consciousness?
the consciousness is uh
So I guess that's what you're asking.
yeah. I'm
So
saying
you're trying to equate the two. So why are you trying to equate the two?
well because you said that psyche is consciousness and subconsciousness.
Yes.
That's pretty much
So why
just
are you
like
saying consciousness is aql? It's mind.
what is mind?
Mind is that's what I was trying to say. So mind is the ability to rationalize. It's the ability to rationalize and aql. 1 + 1 = 2. It's the ability to rationalize and
So
think
is
things.
psyche like encompass emotions?
Yes.
As opposed to mind being like just
Yeah.
one
Just.
part. Oh, okay.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. So how you react to things is your nafs. That's how you. If you have a bad temper, that's a part of your nafs. And that's why I was saying the mind and the soul are universal in terms of everybody's got pretty much the
The
same.
soul is just like life.
Allah says in the Quran, the soul is something from Him, and the verses that mention the soul is like "Nafakhtu fihi min ruhi," where Allah breathed in His soul into Adam. We don't really have a lot of information on the soul, so there's not,
And I think it's just kind of the presence of like living, breathing life in a person.
the idea. Um, I don't know. Like I think with some things. So the story about the ruh in the Quran, they came the believing people of Medina came up to the Prophet and they asked him, "What is the ruh? What is the soul? What is this ruh?" And his response to them was, "This is something. It's an affair from Hada min amri rabbih. This is like a Amr can mean command. It could be a will. This is something from God. So even when the Prophet was pressured and asked him about this question, he was like, it's something from God. It, it, because the soul is like what we think of like the essence of who we are, and this isn't something that we can rationalize.
I
Yeah.
think you could to some extent. I think,
Do you think I'm what I'm trying to encourage you and what I'm trying to push for is that we shouldn't go beyond what the Quran gives us in regards to this, because if the Quran doesn't divulge on this idea and it's something that is a mystery, just leave it a mystery. So this is like the religious, spiritual understanding of who we are as a person. Yeah.
A ruh is like essentially the body without the ruh is no longer like a person, kind of, right? Like when we die, of course, our souls, the ruh, leaves the body. Does that take with it the aql and nafs?
So I would say that I'm not 100% sure, but there are sayings that like when a body can still hear the people around it. So it's I would say that the soul is the only thing that has left a body. The body still contains a nafs and a aql at death. Um, because we have alam al barzakh where we there's a there's a existence of the grave. There will be a time where you exist in the grave. There's like a different existence after this, before qiyamah, before resurrection. There's a in between.
So, like at time of death, will your nafs, your psyche, and your mind eventually leave your body, like after burial or something?
So the body is dead. The body is dead. The body is dead because the soul is out. But you still got these two things. You're like in a midway point, like I said. So I don't know what the soul is, and resurrection, a bodily resurrection, is what most scholars believe in, not a imaginative resurrection. It's a bodily resurrection. Yes. Okay.
So when your soul leaves,
Mhm. The body.
when your soul leaves the body,
Mhm.
the things that are left behind is the nafs
And the aql,
and the aql.
I believe.
The aql is the mind.
Yes.
Okay. And the mind is the rational.
The rational aspect.
And the nafs is the personality. Like
Yes. Who you are.
emotional
Character. Yeah.
temperament.
Yes.
Like that.
Mhm.
Okay. And the soul, the soul contains.
The the body contains all these things.
So the soul is like the
It's the essence.
everything you get down to. Like you take away everything else, all of it.
So
Everything that's material.
if you guys want to talk about like the soul, okay. So um before Adam had the soul breathed into him, he was just a vessel, right? He was and the idea is though that it was he a vessel that still uh existed? Was he different? I think these are just, I think we're getting too, hypothetical here. Like it's too speculative in terms of what is the soul. A lot of people like to think about it as like the animating factor of reality. Like it is the life. Like what is life? It's you know it's the life force. I don't know. There's different ways of understanding it, but the soul is something from God.
So Adam had his nafs and his mind
Hmm.
prior to Allah breathing.
And he had a body, and before the soul was breathed into him, it was kind of like the
So basically, Adam was like, you take out that soul,
yeah.
you just have everything else.
Hmm.
Before Allah. So these things, so nafs and aql did not appear after the soul was breathed in. They did not like.
Cause these things. So aql is actually something that was a creation of God before a lot of things. So there's a hadith um, where Allah creates the aql and He tells it to go back and to go forward, and He tells the aql that by you people will find me. So that is what the aql is. It's a creation, just like the soul is a creation, the nafs is a creation, the body is a creation. They're just different creations.
It's interesting.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
It is interesting. And I know you mentioned like aql is like our rationalization. like common sense, that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
These kind of things are kind of like built over time, no?
Yeah, yeah,
These are like how you raise.
yeah. And your nafs can change. And your nafs can change. Hmm.
Nafs and after can change.
Tazkiyatun nafs. Man, there's this idea in Islam where you're supposed to do tazkiyatun nafs. Tazkiya means to renew or to refreshen, purify, right? Tazkiyatun nafs. So the nafs is something you have to work on improving. Yeah, because you can have a nafs at one point that is amara bisu, like it's going towards bad things, or you can have a nafs that is, the nafs al mutma'inna, it's at peace, it's mitnan. So that is the religious, spiritual understanding of who we are. But I think we also have a further understanding of who we are that's kind of layered on top of that in terms of like who we are in terms of citizenship and who we think we are in terms of culture and community. I think these are very interesting. So I'm going to write these citizenship, and I'll write the whole thing. Culture and community, the three C's. Let me just talk about real quickly in terms of how those things impact who I am. Who am I? You know, and we're trying to define who we are, right? So I'm gonna start with so last week we kind of talked about the collect we I read verses from the Quran where in Surah Al-Hujurat Allah talks about creating us in different tribes and nations so we can get to know with one another. The idea is that there is distinctness, there's differentiation between people and groups of people, so they're they can get to know each other, right? Um, and so I guess the first idea is this: what is the culture? What is culture? Because when we talk about immigration last time, we talked about culture, preservation of culture. So what is culture?
Culmination of like the certain group of people, aspects that are shared among a certain group of people.
How you live.
Oh,
Yeah. So this could be
I,
How you conduct.
religion is usually how you live.
Well, no, how you conduct things.
same thing.
Is
Mm.
religion a part of culture?
Yeah.
Your culture is how you conduct yourself.
I would say that the
Just look at the root word of culture. It's cult, which is like comes from cultivate. No, no.
Oh, okay.
The word cult comes from the word cultivate. Like
hmm
to cultivate something. And cultivate comes
yeah,
from
how they were saying cult too, like
Like, where's he going with this?
all religions are cults. So
No,
cult,
actually,
no,
originally all religions, like all
depends on how you
like
define things.
cults.
Hmm.
But cults come from like to cultivate. That's the
Hmm.
root word of cult.
Hmm.
And cultivating comes from farming.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it means to like to give into something. Like how I cultivate my crop.
You reap what you sow.
Yeah, you like you put your
You reap what you
passion
sow,
into it yourself.
and that's what you'll get from it.
And that's what like a culture
So
community of a thing.
Speech, behavior.
norms, we accepted norms. Because the reason I differentiate between religion and culture is because different norms across cultures, right? So if you go to the way religion is expressed through different cultures makes different so the way a Muslim woman wears the hijab in Syria or Saudi Arabia is completely different than how a woman in India or Pakistan wears her hijab, right? The cultural influence does impact how they express their religious uh, position.
We might wear a
Yeah, yeah. No, but I'm talking about this is a religious mandate. Women have to wear scarves, right? This is the idea. But how they express it is also is impacted by the culture.
Right, but even so, like a lot of traditional Islamic men attire is thobe, like a
Hmm.
thong,
Hmm.
and that style of thobe, or will actually differ from
And that's completely culture.
yeah,
So I'm saying where the culture the culture has a different expression of the religion.
that's not like Islamic clothing, like traditional men's
That would be
clothing.
It's
like
not a religious mandate. I'm talking about religious mandates. So like,
Like
what is
men's, not
hijaz?
women's.
Yeah, I'm just saying that because like, and also because the reason I also think about it is this, the idea that the Middle East is very diverse religiously as well. Like the Arabs are very multi-religious, historically even now. Uh, exactly. Yes. So, even the Persians got Zoroastrians. So the idea is that I feel like religion crosses crosses cultures. Religion can. Yeah, I feel like religion is. I feel.
There's Islam guys like Turks and
Yeah,
Iranians and
and they express it differently. So like the way Turkish women wear their scarf is different. Like they,
Mongols.
you know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you could like put these all into like distinct things. More like you could say that religion encompasses all of them, like a big circle, and then inside that circle, there's like culture, community, and
No, I would say they're distinct. They're very distinct things. Um, and the reason I would say that is because you have a single culture that has various religions, and that's the whole idea. Is that a single culture can have various religions. Persians, Arabs. Like you can have a culture. We all eat the same food. We wear the same clothes. Like a Jewish Arab and a Muslim Arab look the same, eat the same. So what I'm trying to say is that culture is probably closer to shared traits and norms, and how it's more locally constructed due to environment and yeah, it has has closer to do with Allah saying, "I created you in tribes and nations to get to know one another." What is this whole idea of getting to know one each other? You have different cultures, you have different expressions of who you are. That's different cultures. Mm-hmm. شعوباً وقبائل لتعارفوا. So you guys can get to know each other. So the idea is that these culture can have different religions. All right. What's community, and how does it differentiate from citizenship? Because um, right, and I feel like they are distinct because we have religious communities. We'll get to citizenship in a second. Citizenship is very interesting.
the group of people like to have some kind of common knowledge.
yeah, but also have contact.
Okay, so you think contact is important for community?
Common ground.
So like
Yeah, common. It's in the word common.
A nation of that have a shared attribute.
But so would you? So I think recently in the politics we've seen like different communities. Hmm?
the people talk about like the black.
Yeah, in the Muslim community and like the different communities are, um, but so. Mhm.
Some people call the Islamic nation, which is the group of people.
Yeah, so we'll get to that. The ummah is a little different. The community is there. I think it's a lot more local. It's people who you probably like interact with. It's local.
Extremely low.
It's local. It's regular. You know. Yeah, yeah. So I'm a part of multiple communities. That's the idea. So you guys, you go to USF. You're part of the USF student community. You come to the masjid. You're part of the masjid community. And yeah, exactly. And you can tap into these different communities.
I think it even gets very,
Mhm.
very tight knit.
Mhm.
Breaks it, go down and down.
Mhm.
Inside one community, you can break off into
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
5 communities, and they're under that one community.
Yeah, yeah. I think a good example is like a country. Like we're one community. Like if you want to broaden it in to that sense, but each state is a little different. So they're a little community. Usually city, town, neighborhood. A neighborhood can be a community watch. The community watch that they have in neighborhoods.
Yeah, I'll say even like you go to a masjid or
Mhm.
they say there's Sunni or
Click. I want to put click on here. Community is like click. It's very
they
clickish.
say they're
Yeah.
Sunni, and then they can break off
Yeah.
even with inside their own
Yeah.
circle.
Mhm.
Like they live in Temple Terrace, and then you could have
Yeah.
5 shades of the Sunnis that
Yeah.
have their separate masjids,
Mhm.
and they all say they're under,
This one
but
umbrella.
yet they don't go there because they have some.
Beef, or they don't like the way he talks or what he does. Yeah.
So it gets even very,
Very specific.
very.
And it's very personal. Community is it's a personal decision, right? You are choosing to be a part of a community, right? You can cross communities. whereas like culture is something that you're just a part. Like you can adapt to a culture, but you're a part of a culture. But it's not really something you can jump around and choose. Hmm. I want to make sure that we have distinctness between our words, so that the words and their definitions are important. So I don't want to try to say community is the same thing as culture. We're just trying to make them distinct, and then that's why I was trying to emphasize that I think religion is a very distinct thing from culture.
But just for community, like we don't really have a choice in like where we're born, right? It's like how do we really have a personal choice
But
when
like
it comes to
you're choosing to be a part of the masjid community, right?
yeah.
That's your choice.
But if I'm like I'm born here, right? And my parents are like they come here all the time.
You don't have to come here. You don't have to.
Or if I'm a baby, like they
Yeah,
just
yeah,
come here.
because you're a baby. I'm talking about like we're talking about adults here.
Oh, just adults.
Yeah, because like a child is like what because I think community is very like specific. It's personal. Like no, children can't pick their community, but as an adult you can.
Yeah, they don't have like experience. They don't have like wisdom.
Yeah, or the ability. Like a child can't choose to be a part of a different community. They don't have the ability. Like they're part of the daycare community. Like that's what That's it. That's their clique. Yeah. But even there, they probably do have their own sub cliques within their. Yeah. Mhm. That's actually true. Gender. You know.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's really like a scaled word saying a group of people within a certain
That share something together. There's something. They have contact with each other. There's some commonality. It's local. You see them regularly. There's some type of regular interaction. It's cliquish and it's personal. I think that's uh, what we come up with community.
like the underlying things defining culture is like the way of life, like how
Okay.
people
Yeah.
support themselves,
How you live. So we have shared traits, norms, how you live.
like how you make your money, like
Yeah.
a community of like say like miners or
Okay.
like this that defines like a certain culture, and then like it may encompass like a whole region, and then that region is now defined as like say like the South. We have a distinct
Yeah,
culture
these are
within
different
those
layers.
regions.
So there's different layers, and I think, but again, I just want to make sure that these are distinct things. And then I think the last one is citizenship. And um, so, what is citizenship? What does it mean to be a citizenship? What is a citizen?
It's just
political
a
allegiance.
state. You have
Oh, I like how you put allegiance in there.
Whoa.
well,
I
you
I
could
don't know
be
how
a
to.
spy.
Well, maybe I'm like,
You could be a
put
citizen
my
and a
allegiance
spy.
to Canada, but like I'm
No,
not a
but
citizen of Canada.
okay, that's true.
Well, we're talking about
But well, let's. What is citizenship?
It's
your
more than
passport.
just you have
A
a.
passport. You think it's like official? It's a
Is that
legal.
not
It's a legal
Yeah,
definition.
it's like
It's a legal doc. It's defined by law.
It's a legal thing more than anything
Okay. So, one of the things that we've been doing a lot of is looking and trying to understand things and trying. So first we started off with the soul and the spiritual, religious understanding of who we are. Then we built up on it in terms of culture and community. These are not necessarily things we have control over. We can pick a little bit of our community. We can try to adapt different cultures. Like we like different foods. We can appreciate different cultures, right? Um, but these aren't really things that are proscribed, right? A culture isn't dictated to you. Whereas we're coming into a realm of definition by law, like where humans are coming together and defining what is, right? So one of the things we talked about last time in terms of where are we were like something that makes a nation is its borders. There's a legal boundary of this is where it starts, this is where it ends. You have to have certain requirements to enter. There has to be as a country. So and that's people eh, you know, proscribing these things. And so here, we talked about allegiance, but I think defined by law. It's illegal. Citizenship is something defined by law. So I think
Yeah, it's your legal status.
it's your legal status. Exactly, exactly. Legal status. And one of the things that I've been trying to show through these talks is that a lot of what we experience and understand about the world is defined by law in terms of how we experience reality. So I will first give an example of like religious law, right? So we live our lives according to a certain religious law, right? We pray, we fast, we don't drink alcohol, we don't have sex outside of marriage. There's a certain law God has prescribed upon us. Yeah, don't eat pork. We have a marja we follow that gives us his risale. This marja is a jurisprudent. He's a scholar of Islamic law, and he's giving his edicts on what is permissible and impermissible, right? So that influences how we see the world and how we go about and through the world, like how we act in the world. And I think this idea of proscription and law is something that we have to like internalize and we'll be very cognizant of because it's something we have very, very little control over, right? In terms of the Sharia, in terms of like religious law, we have no control over that. That's something we believe in because God told us, right? And we have these scholars, these jurisprudents who have the whole idea is that they have studied and understood the different sources for understanding God's law, and they are the ones who dictate it to us, right? All right, so that's religious law. So now I want to get into the idea of what that influences our personal spiritual lives. So what is the citizenship in the Sharia? That's just the first question. Then we'll talk about citizenship uh in the law of the land. So what is citizenship in Islam? Yeah.
I guess like shahada.
Exactly. Yeah. So the Sharia. So what is a fiqhi answer? Remember, my brother Dr. Jaffer, he was talking about. There's different ways of understanding. There's theologians will talk about a concept in a specific way. Jurists will talk about something in a specific way. So in regards to what it means to be a part of the Muslim ummah, it's the shahada exactly. So it's a legal definition in terms of what it means to be a part of this nation. Allegiance. Well, I don't know about the Shahada doesn't really have allegiance. I don't know if that's in a because yeah, you're not giving allegiance to anything in the Shahada. It's it's a testament of faith regarding what you hold to be true. And you know the testament of faith is La ilaha. There is no God illallah except Allah. Wa ashhadu, and I I swear or I am witness to that ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, that Muhammad is a prophet of God. He is a messenger of God. Um, uh, and what's interesting is that we as Shia also believe there's a continuation to this testament because we believe that we're also part of a different inner community where we say that there is also allegiance to not allegiance, not allegiance. There's also a testament to the reality of Ali ibn Abi Talib being and the Imams after him being also having being because it's Sharia. It's that this is a legal proscription by God. So God has told us to believe in Him in a specific way. So we're saying La ilaha. So in the first part of the testament of faith. So God is telling us to negate all previous ideas of God. Illallah. So we are re-understanding God in the way that He has prescribed to us, and that Muhammad alayhi salam is the messenger of God, and then that Ali ibn Abi Talib and the Imams after him are the guides and Imams of the Muslim community. Yes. So that's the definition of citizenship in Islam. So now, what is the definition of citizenship currently across most nations? Right. So there isn't like a border of the Muslim community. Assalamu alaikum, brother. Assalamu alaikum, doctor. That kind of limits, like, I guess the spiritual religious community or nation has no borders, but we do have borders in specific nations here today. So I'm actually passing around two documents. One is this citizenship and naturalization test, and the other one is like the application for citizenship. So if you guys can, yeah, you guys can take one of each. Just I would like to for you guys to like see them. Take one of each. Yeah. Um, there's only 5 copies, so if you guys could share, I would appreciate it. I guess I can have it here.
We can like share it between like each other.
Okay. So, um, last time when we were talking about this, in terms of where are we were talking about some of the restrictions on who can be in a place. So, can do we restrict where someone can be based off of? So, like this is a religious place, but we don't restrict people based off of their ideology in terms of who can enter, right? That would be crazy. Um, do we restrict them based off of behavior? Maybe. You know, if someone's acting in a certain way that is disruptive, we would restrict them from entering if they're a threat to us, right? Uh, and excuse me.
Are we talking about ourselves when you said like who do we restrict? So you're saying us like this community.
And so, in terms of citizenship, so we talked about the. So what I was talking about is that the restrictions. So restrictions is one of the things that helps define something, right? And so we talked about restrictions in terms of location. Now we're talking about restrictions in terms of identity, like who are we? And so we talked about the religious restriction in terms of who we are, that there is a testament of faith to be a part of like the Muslim Ummah. So we talked about, and now we're talking about this idea of citizenship in this nation, in the United States. And we, are there restrictions? And so one of the interesting restrictions I brought up last time was that are there any ideological restrictions? What kind of restrictions are there to be a citizen? And so there's a series of questions that I always like. That it's a lot of questions. It's on starts on page 6 of 14. Where there's there, how many are there? There's 37 yes no questions with subparts. So it starts off with number 1. So these are kind of like the restrictions that we've, this application the United States government has created, right? In terms of like what kind of restrictions are we creating in terms of who can be a citizen.
Is it the case that automatically if you say
For certain some of these, yes. Yeah, for some of these, yes. So number 5A. So all of these actually. If you say yes to unless you have an excuse. So if you have ever claimed to be a U.S. citizen and you aren't a U.S. citizen, that's you can't get citizenship because of you lied. You're committing fraud in terms of what you're doing. Because one of the biggest, yeah, you're committing fraud. Have you ever voted? If you voted and you weren't a citizen, you are. All these things will take you out of. It won't allow you to become a citizen. If you don't show, if you owe taxes and you're not in like a plan to repay, and if you had a permanent resident card and you ever claimed you weren't. I think the more interesting ones are like 5A. Have you ever been associated with any communist or totalitarian party anywhere in the world? So this is an ideological restriction in terms of communism. I think they're kind of so. Let's kind of talk about this. So when we're talking about citizenship religiously, we're saying it's kind of straightforward. There's no like research into the idea. We're not looking into your soul to see if you actually believe these things. It's just about pronouncement. And how do you guys feel about that? What to be a part of a community, to be a part of a citizen, to claim citizenship? What should be used as a restriction. Because we talked about restrictions in terms of letting people into the country, into our land. So what kind of restrictions do you guys think are reasonable to some ideology? So you think there should be ideological restrictions? Okay.
That could cause harm to a society.
Like what?
Like there are communism.
What is that like? That should be an incentive qualification.
Yeah.
Any ideology.
I think it should be like
all ideology.
taken,
Any
taken in consideration.
They'll probably put that under a file.
So do you think that Muslim could be on here? So religion is kind of protected by the Constitution, which is nice, but um, I would say that you could. How could it be created? So
Religion is more like it's like around the world. Like everybody has this. Like Muslim is everywhere. Muslims are everywhere. Christians are everywhere. Jews.
So I'm trying to figure out a way. So let's say this: if you believe in wilayat al-faqih, you can't become a citizen because this isn't necessarily like a. Yeah, I will. So this isn't necessarily like a religion. It's belief in a certain idea within the religion. So wilayat al-faqih is the current uh, uh, government in Iran where it's yeah the authority of the jurist. So wilayat al-faqih kind of translates into the authority of the jurist, and so the idea is that can I finish? Yeah. Um, the idea is that this concept where the jurist is the one that controls the nation or directs the nation very simply. The Iran has their own constitution, it's very detailed. You can look at it, but um, the the reason I bring it up is just so we can try to test the idea of
You can't be a citizen in the United States.
if you believe in wilayat al-faqih. Is that huh?
Is there a law?
No, but there's a law that says you can't be a communist. So I'm trying to test you guys. I'm trying to a hypothetical for you guys to consider. What are the boundaries? Because he's saying yes, ideology should be a restriction. Uh, let's let that restriction impact our community so you can understand it better and see how you react. What do you mean by negative? What do you mean by negative?
You can believe in whatever you want. You just can't act upon it.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's interesting.
I can believe
You okay.
in whatever I want. Constitution. I mean, I'm free to believe.
So that kind of impacts the second part of it. So that's 5A. 5B, advocated, supported, and promoted any of the following. So that talks about actually engaging in these things. Where have you tried to oppose organized government? Uh, you know, have you advocated for world communism? This is so interesting. This is a new question. Where this with any group anywhere in the world that advocated any of the following, right? Have you ever advocated opposition to all organized government, like anarchy? So they're trying to. So this idea of anarchy, you can't be an anarchist. You can't believe in abolition of government. World communism. The establishment in the United States of a totalitarian dictatorship. Interesting, right? That one's really interesting. The establishment in the United States of a totalitarian dictatorship. What is a would Wilayat al-Faqih be considered a totalitarian dictatorship? If I wanted to implement the caliphate, like in Britain, we keep bringing up Britain, where they want to have a caliphate in Britain.
That's a problem. Because they should go back home.
Yeah, so you're saying
So I do believe if an outsider comes in, they should be stopped from their ideology.
Yeah.
I would say that.
Yeah.
But once you're like, if I was born here, then I could think whatever. If that makes sense.
you don't believe in deporting people of different ideologies, just send them
No,
out.
if you're born here, you're a citizen. You can think whatever you want.
Mm.
But if someone's trying to come in, you should stop
I
certain
think it's because
ideologies.
necessarily if there's like a particularity, it necessarily has to be exclusive. So like the United States is built on an ideology.
Mm-hmm.
So just by that premise alone, that it has to be exclusive of ideologies that are opposing to it.
So you mentioned something, preservation of founding ideology. The preservation of founding. So
It's just about exclusivity.
so we don't want to overturn the Constitution type of thing, right? So a lot of these would be trying to overturn or change the legal system, right? So the legal system that has created, it's kind of like a circular idea, is that we don't want
It's
Yes,
just
exactly.
logical. It's just as logical as having like citizenship. Like the state wants to preserve its like what it is.
If
Hmm.
someone openly declares he wants to, you gonna let him in? He's
Nah.
like, I'll only get rid of this Constitution. You're gonna say, oh, come on, bring all your brothers together. So yeah, you stop the ideology.
It's an ideology that
Okay.
Bring all your friends with
I
you.
thought it was just like action. You can just believe anything you want.
Well, then I said, no, I said only if you're born here, you're activate whatever I want.
Oh, you only said that
being
people want
Yeah.
associated with him.
not like people
That's
want
like
outside.
No,
you're
you can't
basically
bring them in.
pledging
What if
allegiance
they like they don't act on
to
it?
the
Like the
group.
groups. You
So
still wouldn't
now
act on
you're
it.
loyal to that, and now you want to be a
Mm.
citizen.
Loyalty
So
to
now
ideology.
you're kind of betraying that loyalty, or you have that like
You're not.
still loyal to
What's to say that you're going to shift your loyalties? I guess what you're saying is like shift your ideology to the one that conforms with this community, this idea of this prescribed legal definition. So would you guys say that? Okay, let's keep going.
Can I ask?
Mhm.
Do we know if people have been potentially situated?
Yeah, I'm saying yes. If you say yes to any of these, you will face issues getting citizenship. So a lot of these will stop you from getting citizenship. Yes, yes. So if you go on the next page, any of these, if you say yes to, will prevent you from getting citizenship. All of them. So have you ever been a member of, involved in, or in any way associated with, or have you ever provided money, a thing of value, services or labor, or any other assistance or support to a group that used weapons or explosive with intent to harm another person, engaged in kidnapping, assassination, hijacking, threatened, attempted, conspired, prepared, planned, advocated for, or incited others to commit any of the acts listed above, right? So, and then it goes on. Have you ever ordered, called for, committed, assisted, helped with torture, genocide, killing, or trying to kill any person? All of these. So these are actions. So a lot of these are actions where I think everybody seems like in agreement that actions should be restricted. You can't act or behave in a certain way.
These actions come from having an ideology about, uh, let's say like genocide. Like, let's say like the most obvious one, Hitler.
Hmm.
He thought that the Aryans were superiors,
Hmm.
and he wanted to get rid of
We don't want that ideology here.
We don't want that.
So you're saying that most actions are motivated by ideology. Okay. I don't think that's a
I heard
controversial
about this
statement.
cartels.
Hmm.
Their
What about them?
ideology is just use violence and have what's the word? Drug
Hmm.
trafficking, human trafficking. Have
Is that
control,
an
have
ideology
control
like
over
fascism?
I don't think cartels. I think cartels are more of like a
they want
community.
control over a land and like they want it to be theirs, you know. Like how
Cartels usually. I don't know what brought up cartels. I don't know what brought up cartels.
Not really an ideology. That's just motivation of greed and money.
Yeah, I don't think cartels are just a group of people. I don't know if that has
He thinks
I
like
think they have I
what.
don't know. I think that's just how I see it. Like they have
I don't know. So these are all very interesting. So we all. What about like? Do you guys think of? Can you be reformed? So this is one of the next page on page 8. It's about committing any crimes. Um, so if you commit and these are actually um the things that will restrict you from becoming a citizen in terms of crimes. Um, let's talk about a few of them. If you have 3 DUIs, you can't become a citizen. Um, if you have been in prison for over a year, so there's a crime involving moral turpitude. That's what they call it, a crime involving moral turpitude. It's usually defined as um, any sentencing or punishment over a year will prevent you from becoming a citizen. It will. A lot of these crimes could also have you removed from the country. Um, uh, any and also with the citizenship you have to have 4 years of good moral character. This is like another requirement outside of the application questions, the citizenship questions we're going to get through. You have to have 4 years of good moral character where you have, which means that you have no criminal issues, none, for 4 years. um, Being less than a crime of moral turpitude. So even if you um, they don't like to see speeding tickets that are too high, like but if that's like if you just I'm trying to think of a petty crime. Um,
Loitering.
yeah, the or a lot of the ones that I see are like domestic violence, where there's a claim of domestic violence, but you aren't charged. That would be a crime, that would go against your good moral character within 4 years. They will look frowned upon that, even if there's no charges. There was an investigation. There was police that were called. Um, you're detained. These things will, you need 4 years of not experiencing things like that. It, but should that stop you from becoming a citizen? So, like we talked about, becoming a Muslim is very open in terms of who can be a part of this nation. Um, you can commit a crime and repent in the Sharia. So, uh, what do you guys think about this? Are there certain crimes that should be definitely, like we had the crimes on the previous side, like the previous page. So we all consider torture, genocide, killing. These are all crimes. Hmm.
I know there's like certain things that are unforgivable. No.
Uh,
Are there, there
I
are
don't know.
sins that are unforgivable. In this world, if you seek repentance for any sin, all forgiven. Really? Even shirk, yeah. Even shirk, if as long as you're alive in this world and you seek repentance, it's forgiven. Yeah. Shirk is associating partners with God. Oh. Basically, polytheism.
Yeah. What's Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, this translates to like all. Shirk is unforgivable. Yeah, that's so after you die, if you did. Oh, okay.
Hmm.
He dies as a
We don't want those people to be a part of our community. They don't want them to be a part of our nation.
correct me if I'm wrong. You need like a certain degree amount of years of residence in the U.S. right?
Yes,
Like 5 or 15 years.
5.
5 years. So doesn't that kind of negate a lot of stuff? Live 5 years, American, integrated to some extent in that community, kind of negates these like ideological tendencies you might have had.
I don't know. I don't think so. That's why these questions are on here. And so okay, so I'm just gonna mention finally is like, what are the things that are required for citizenship, right? Residency, like you mentioned. Continuous residency is also very important. It's connected. Um, you need to have that good moral character. You need to pass this application, and finally, you need to take a civics exam. So I think the civics is the most interesting question, right? You go through this entire process of filling out this application. You then have to do an English language and civics exam. Do you guys think that's important? Yeah? You need to know your history. What about language? Like, you can only take it in English.
That's a big part of culture, right? We're trying to protect.
Hmm. So, is that what a citizenship's supposed to do? So this is legally prescribed. So that's one of the things I'm trying to keep distinct. So is your citizenship supposed to preserve your culture? I'm saying no, they're totally two different things. Citizenship is not preserve culture. Because again, culture in the South is different than the culture in New England, right? I, but you don't in Miami. You can live your whole life not knowing a lick of English. No, I would say that it's not important. I don't think I I would say that I don't think that even the founders considered it that important language. That's why we don't have an official language.
You have so many obligations. One of them is the draft. There's the draft,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Time of war, you might
Mhm.
be called
Yeah, actually, we should actually look at this last.
when you're called up for service.
Yeah, there's the oath of allegiance. Actually, let's read the oath of allegiance on the last page, page 14, before we go on to the civics question. The oath of allegiance is something that you say at the naturalization ceremony, and it's something you have to sign off on. I hereby declare an oath that I absolutely and entirely renounce and adjure all allegiance and fidelity to a foreign prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty, of whom or which I have heretofore been a subject or citizen, that I will support and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I will bear arms on behalf of the United States when required by law, that I will perform non combatant service in the armed forces of the United States when required by law, that I will perform work of national importance under civilian direction when required by law, and that I will take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion. So help me God. So there's a few things. There's all of them say by the law, except the First Testament. I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States, because that is the law of the land and the laws of the United States against all foreign and domestic. So and just like we were talking about here, preservation of founding, preservation of the law is extremely important. The law is what defines citizenship. It's what defines the nation. So we're again going back to how I started, is the idea of that these proscribed laws influence and impact how we experience reality and understand the world. And so understanding the laws is very important. Spiritual laws and religious laws are very important. You need to understand them and comprehend them. Also, the laws of the land in terms of how you are defined and understood. So I just want to ask you guys a couple questions in here before I end. One is, what is one reason colonists came to America? Yes, religious freedom is one of the options. So this question has 6 different. So I'm number 58, page 6. It's freedom, political liberty, religious freedom, economic opportunity, practice their religion, escape persecution. There's some funny questions here. I like to. What happened at the Constitutional Convention? What happened at the Constitutional Convention? The Constitution was written, guys. The Constitution was written. When was the Constitution written? What year? This, nope. 1787. The Federalist Papers, written by who? Federalist Papers. Yes. No, it's not multiple choice. It's free response, orally. So one of the things about you have to learn how to English is that you have to be able to read a sentence in English. You have to write a sentence in English, and you have to be able to answer these questions in English. Name one Native American tribe. Yes. Uh, uh, During the Cold War, what was the main concern of the United States? The communism. During the Cold War, what was the main issue? Communism ideology. They asked. What? Name one branch or part of the government. Judicial. Yeah. How many senators are there? Wrong. 100. How many years are they elected for?
Oh wait, 6.
6. Senators are for 6. So these are interesting things you got to know, right, to become a citizen. So in the United States, the concept of just soili. So you are the citizen of soil. Soil is so the United States is one of the few common law states that allows for citizenship through birth, like where you're born. The other juice, I forget the legal term, but it's by blood. So most countries, you get citizenship by blood. It's by who your parents give you citizenship. Uh, Usually it's dad, honestly. Most Arab countries, it's dad. Your mom can't give you citizenship. Yeah, so, yeah.
But it's kind of weird because like I know the oath of allegiance at the end.
Mm.
My family and I were still technically dual citizens, but according
Mhm.
to the oath, like you have to renounce.
No, so you don't.
I don't know. They just say you have to maintain allegiance to the United States.
Hmm. You don't have to
Not
revoke.
absolutely and entirely renouncing until all
Mhm.
allegiance is fidelity to any foreign prince,
Mhm.
ultimate state, or sovereignty.
Hmm.
So you have to have loyalty to this.
Yeah, so dual citizenship is like a international issue in terms of like, oh, some countries don't allow it, like some countries do. So yeah, India does not allow it. So yes, so it depends on the countries, but the United States does allow dual citizenship. No, I think a lot do allow for most. I think allow for dual citizenship. There are the few that don't.
The birth thing,
Hmm.
I think they should. I don't know
You
why.
don't think it'd be by birth? It should be by blood.
It, it's ridiculous. They have birth boards.
Yeah, yeah. The anchor babies. The.
I mean, this is the only country that does it.
Hmm.
Nobody else.
I think the Australia, the United States, it's the common law states, and Britain, I believe, are the only ones that
They should have like wealthy
have.
Chinese that
Yeah.
come over just on purpose just to have a baby.
Yeah, no, it's a very common thing in the United States. But one of the examples I gave was someone very close to me is that this happened. Their mother gave birth to them in the United States. They lived, they went and lived their entire lives in the United Arab Emirates. Their senior year of high school, they came to the United States. They got admitted to a college here in the U.S. This is a family of four boys. One's a doctor, very, you know, doctor is doing very well for himself. An engineer and two dentists, right? The idea is that okay, there is this problem where people are trying to take this citizenship in a very maybe uh, um, I don't know, advantageous way. They're taking advantage of the laws um, for their own benefit. But I also think the country benefits from this as well. Like this is an example. Yeah.
You got to name both sides.
I don't think. I think in terms of the, I think people have a right to that. That if like the people that you're born out of life,
No, that's horrible. For what?
but I
For
think
what reason?
if you want
Yeah,
to, I think to address it, like you might want to address travel and migration.
I think by blood is makes more sense too, because that's I'm just throwing this out there. But the United States does it for a specific reason. It's part of the legal culture, like the type of jurisprudence that they have been a part of, the common law. So the United States
I
gets
think
its
it's also
common.
part of the foundation of America as a country.
So so law is very interesting in terms of the way that the jurisprudence has like evolved in the West is very very interesting. So in Islam, we jurisprudence has always law has been very specific to religious jurisprudence. The idea of like civil or secular jurisprudence is something that has come recently to like the Muslim world. Um, there were codices, there were ways of you know because they still had nations, they still had laws for the police, but it's very distinct, right? So I think the biggest difference would be like the Enlightenment that Europe went through, where there was a very intentional separation of the sciences and law being a part of that from religion and uh,
Secularism and liberalization. Right.
so the idea that I was talking about was that uh, the law developed in the West very differently than it did in the Arab world. There was this Enlightenment period where the goal was, the intention was to separate the religion from the sciences. The in the past, there was this saying that the philosophy, which was meant for like understanding reality, I guess, was the handmaiden of theology, where there's this idea of wanting to separate the philosophical understandings from the religious doctrine. This uh, occurred, back in the 1500s. There's been a lot of development, and again, legal scholarship in this method has progressed in a very specific way. And so the founding of this nation was founded on very specific legal doctrines and legal philosophy. The Constitution has that, embodies it. The common law doctrine, so common law is different than like codices. So common law is uh, uh, the easiest way to, I guess, understand it is that laws can be given by jurists. Laws are given by judges when they give their opinions. So it's very different than like the French system where all laws are codified. Um, and again, you can understand that in terms of how it progressed and changed in the West, very differently than it happened in the Arab world. But again, I just want to emphasize that the law is very important. We got to understand it and how it impacts and influences our understandings of who we are. And thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. Can we read Surah Al-Asr real quick as we end? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. So,
I don't know if there's. We still have.
There's your old stuff from
Is it on the
last
map?
week.
okay.
Oh,
But it's a
perfect.
little messy, I think.
And up?
No, I think this is something else.
All right, no worries. So, yeah, I'll just use the same side if that's cool.
No, it's fine. Oh, yeah, it's not.
Good to see you, mashallah. Yeah. Ahsant. All right. Recite a loud salawat, inshallah. All right. So, inshallah, we're going to be talking about a concept that we started last week. Remember, we were talking about the word kufr, right? You guys remember this? So, we'll just kind of recap what we talked about last week, and then we'll get into some new content, inshallah. So, do you guys remember what kufr means?
Covering.
Covering, right? Covering or to hide, right? Covering, or we'll say hiding, right? Hiding. Okay. So remember we said that even in Arabic you can call night, the night, you can call it al-kafir, right? Al-layl al-kafir means a night that covers, right? That because that's what the night does. The night envelops things, it keeps things in the dark, right? So it's a way to hide things. Remember we said kafir in Arabic has many meanings, but the general gist of the meaning is to cover or to hide, right? So another example is Brother Sha'ar mentioned this last week about a farmer, right? Because a farmer puts grains in the ground. He's a fallah, right? Basically puts grains in the ground and then he covers it, right? So he is also, you can call that person also a kafir, right? So in that sense, we talked about kufr. The word kafir, of course, is the one who's doing kufr, right? So in that sense, we also talked about the fact that kufr has two opposites in the Quran. Do you guys remember what opposites existed for the word kufr? There were two. Yeah. So versus iman, right? And what was the other one? Shukr, right? You guys remember shukr? Okay, so kufr is the opposite of shukr, right? In the Quran, right? So, uh, you know, gratitude and ingratitude, right? But then it's also the opposite. Remember, we said this was a new thing in the Quran that came about, where when the Quran came down, it started using this word iman as the opposite of kufr, right? So iman, remember what we said about the word iman? What does it come from? Safety, right? This concept of safety, to be secure, to be firm, right? So kufr is the opposite of that. Kufr is when you don't have any sense of security, any sense of safety, right? You don't have any sense of uh, confidence, right? Uh, tranquility. Yeah, exactly. So you see how those concepts semantically tie together, right? So this was a new thing where the Quran took this word kufr and made it in opposition to the word iman. In Arabic, before the Quran, the word shukr and kufr were deemed opposites, right? And the Quran uses that dichotomy as well, but it employed this new system, this new nexus of understanding by taking the word iman, meaning belief, and making that opposite to the word kufr as well, right?
How did the Arabs in Jahiliyyah understand Iman? Did they have a concept of Iman?
No, that concept didn't really exist. To say somebody's a mu'min, this word mu'min, didn't really exist in their lexicon. It was a new phraseology that the Quran developed, you know?
What was the relationship with like the idols? Like, so what kind of? I guess there are verses in the Quran where it's like if you ask who created the heaven and the earth, they would answer God. Like,
Yeah.
so what was what did these idols give them?
So they saw them as intercessors, right? They saw them as conduits towards God, right? Um, yes, right? And they believed that these were basically means that God had made on the earth, almost like demigods. God had relegated authority to them, and that they were the ones that did, the daily, sort of, for instance, the rainfall. There was a God that controlled that. There was a God that controlled, for instance, sustenance, who gets what, right? There was a God that controlled fertility. So all of these different avenues of human life were controlled by a separate God, but they were all under the purview of Allah, right? So this is how they understood, and that's why they would worship these demigods, but under the understanding that they're sort of been relegated authority by God to give them certain blessings or certain bounties, right?
And I guess
So
that kind of polytheism isn't really secure because you don't
yeah,
know what God to go to for which situation.
exactly. Yeah. So you can see kind of how this, even semantically, how it was revolutionary for the way that the Arabs were hearing this word mu'min, as if somebody has now gained security, somebody's gained tranquility in their life. They're now safe. Whereas before they were in a state where they had no security, no sense of being well grounded, right? And that's how the Quran sort of created this new idea that the Arabs didn't have at the time, right? So so we talked about this, and then remember we also talked about the fact that we have to, whenever we think about kufr, we have to look at it from two lenses, right? So we look at, and we talked about there's four different types of kufr. Do you guys remember this? Here, we'll go through it again. One, two.
Like two X's, one check mark.
You guys remember that? Yeah. So we'll say tongue, right, and heart, right? All right. So let's say we acknowledge something with our tongue, but we reject it with our heart. What's that? What is that? Not taqiyya. Taqiyya is different. So taqiyya so taqiyya is when you taqiyya is I guess it's a type of hiding your belief, right? But it's the opposite. It's when you actually are in your heart, you accept iman, but with your tongue you reject it, right? But we're saying, let's say you accept faith with your tongue, but you reject it with your heart. What is that called? A hypocrite. Yes. Okay. So this is hypocrisy, right? So we said this is called kufrun nifaq, right? Hypocrisy. Okay. Now what if I, let's say, reject with my tongue, but I accept with my heart? That's we said, that can be called taqiyya. Okay. So that'll be different. But we'll say, for instance, let's say I reject with my tongue and I reject with my heart. What's that?
Complete.
Yeah, there's disbelief, right?
Yeah. So you can say this would be called what we call inkar, right? So the kufr of rejection, right? Rejection, right? So it means like you basically, in totality, you don't acknowledge it with your tongue, you don't acknowledge it with your heart, right? Um, Now there is a third type. So actually, there is a type where you could say that you reject it with your tongue, but you accept it with your heart. What is that called? We said, okay, taqiyya, but in this taqiyya would be you accept it with your heart, but you reject it with your tongue for the sake of preserving your own life, right? But let's say somebody who does this, where you bring them the truth and they say, no, we don't believe this, but in their heart of hearts they know it's the truth. That's called. So it's not quite obstinance. Obstinance is the very last category we're going to get to, but this would be what we call al-juhud. Al-juhud, there's a verse in the Quran, وَجَحَدُوا بِهَا وَاسْتَيْقَنَتْهَا أَنفُسُهُم ظُلْمًا وَعُلُوًا, that they rejected it, right? They rejected it while their hearts were actually completely convinced it's the truth. This would be like the kufr of Fir'aun, right? Fir'aun
Like arrogance.
knew that this was the truth, right? What Prophet Musa brought was the truth, but he rejected it, right? So this verse in the Quran is specifically about
How about
Fir'aun, right?
Satan? Like, did he?
Satan is another great example. Yes, he knows for sure that Allah is, you know, Allah is, when he told him to prostrate to Adam, he was in the right, but he is sort of that arrogance prevents him, right? But yeah, so this is called, we'll say, denial, right?
Oh, the word
Denial,
denial is on it.
right?
That sounds good. That sounds good.
Right? Okay. So then there's a fourth type where you accept it with your tongue and you accept it with your heart, but you still don't put it into practice. So this is called obstinacy, right? It's called kufrun al-inad, right? Kufrun al-inad, so obstinacy. Uh, uh, yeah, so obstinacy in this case would mean, yeah, so for instance, somebody who says they're Muslim, right? Believes it in their heart of hearts, but then they don't pray, right? That's obstinacy. That's kufrun al-inad, right? Um, yeah, it's not
But it's
necessarily only
intentional. It's your
lazy. Laziness could be a factor, but it could also be that they're just like, you know, they just have jealousy, for instance, right? Jealousy is also a barrier sometimes. Like for instance, people knew Imam Ali should be the successor of the Holy Prophet, right? But they still rejected it, even though that they had affirmed it at Ghadir. They said that Imam should be the, they actually gave congratulatory messages to Imam Ali, right? And they knew it was the truth in their hearts, but they still rejected it, right?
Initially obstinacy and then became denial.
No, it wasn't really denial because I guess, yeah, you could say that. Yeah, it started maybe obstinacy and then it became denial, but many of them still would call like Imam Ali, they would still call him, Mawlai, for instance. They would still, that word Mawla was, they still used it, but they wouldn't give Imam Ali his right? So you can say, even for instance, uh, a very famous companion, you guys might know, his name is Malik ibn Anas, So, or sorry, Anas bin Malik. Anas bin Malik. So Anas bin Malik was one of the companions of the Prophet that actually witnessed the Ghadir, right? And he saw it, and Imam Ali actually came to him and told him that, were you not there at Ghadir? Can you not testify that?
He was one of the negotiators at Safin.
No, that was Abu Musa al-Ash'ari. That was a different person. Yeah, so Anas bin Malik he's a very famous scholar amongst Ahlul Sunnah that they highly revere and respect. But um, Imam Ali came to him, right, and told him, didn't you recall what happened at Ghadir? And he said that I I've grown old and I can't remember. Please excuse me, right? So Imam Ali told him at that point that if you are lying, then God will strike you with a sickness for this, right? Because he was being called to testify and he rejected, even though he actually did remember, but he just didn't want to say it, right? So in a sense, that's kind of an obstinacy. It's like it's the truth, and you would say it with your tongue, but because of some rancor within you, or because of laziness, whatever the cause is, but you refuse to act upon it, right? So those are the four types of kufr that we talked about last time,
Are
right?
those legal definitions?
This is a linguistic analysis, right? So now we're going to get into how the word is used in Islamic terminology, right? That's what we're going to talk about hopefully a little bit more today. So before we get into that though, I want to talk about something. Do you guys have any questions about this? Does this make sense? Okay. So before we get into that, I want to talk about something super important, which is this concept. When we're going to understand kufr, you have to go back to the word iman, right? So what is iman, right? And then you can understand what kufr is, right? So what's iman? There's a very famous hadith. It says, al-iman huwa at-tasdiq bil-jinan, right? To believe in the hereafter, basically. You believe in Jannah, right? In particular, but at-tasdiq bil-jinan, meaning believing in the afterlife, right? Uh, wal-iqrar bil-lisan, basically to acknowledge something with your tongue. Wal-amal bil-arkan, and to act basically with your limbs, right? So it's basically three things, right? It's belief with the heart, right? So we can say heart, we can say heart, tongue, and actions, right? So those three things make up iman, right? That's what iman is, right? So heart, tongue, and actions, right? So okay, so I think that's very, very important. That point that we made last week was that we do not judge people on the basis of what's in their heart. We judge them on what is zahir, what we can see, right? So in particular, what is it that makes you a Muslim? It's the shahada, right? And what is that? That's words you're saying with your mouth, right? It's what we call the kalima, right? People call it kalima as well. Um, so you're saying that with your tongue, and that's what makes you a Muslim, right? So to become a Muslim, that's all you have to do. And that's what people judge you by. Remember, then we talked about a very famous incident where a person, uh, you know, an enemy combatant during the Battle of Badr, right? He was fighting with one of the Muslims, right? And he was at the verge of basically, killing him, right? Killing this enemy combatant. And then the guy says, like, he starts saying ashhadu an, he starts saying the kalima, right? Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. And the Muslim says, "Oh, now that I overpowered you, now you're gonna say the kalima," and he killed him, right? And then the Prophet told him, "I completely dissociate myself from what you did. What you did is completely illegitimate, because this guy said these words of faith that make him a Muslim, and yet you still killed him." And the guy said, "Oh, well, he was just playing. He was at the verge of dying. He was just trying to save his life. And the Prophet said, "Well, you don't know. You never went into his heart to see, you know, why exactly he was saying that. So you cannot assume anything, right? So we have to go by the tongue, right? What we call the zahir, right? When somebody gives that testament of faith, we accept their Islam. We accept that they're Muslims, right? So that's something super important. We are not God has not put us in charge of what's in someone's heart. Or when it comes to actions, though, that's an area where we can discuss a little bit, and I think would be very interesting to talk about.
Question first came up
About certain actions, right?
certain
Um,
actions
yes, right. Yes, you have a question? Oh, okay. All right. So one thing that I really want to point out, though, is the importance of speech in religious understanding, right? So you'll see that most of what we have in our religion is actually based on words, right? Words make the difference between uh, marriage and fornication, right? What makes marriage legitimate in Islam?
contract.
It's a contract, and that contract, is it written? It doesn't have to be. It's just purely verbal. In fact, you can just say the formulaic statement that makes you married, right? And the woman answers, right, or her representative answers, and you're married. That's it. I mean, there's certain conditions. You have to have a dowry, of course. You have to have witnesses if you're having a permanent marriage, things like that. But there's outside of that, it's just a verbal contract. That's what makes you married, right? And that's what differentiates a marriage from fornication, right? So think about that, right?
It's like
That's a
verbalizing,
huge,
making it
yeah,
I don't know. No, it's making it out. It's making it outside. It's
yeah,
making it apparent for everybody. It's making it exposed.
right, exactly. And what's interesting is, I think perhaps unlike other religions, in Islam, you don't actually even need a sheikh, for instance, or a scholar to sort of bless your marriage. You can do it purely on your own. If you can say the Arabic statement, you know, and the woman can answer, or her representative can answer, and her representative is somebody who she basically allows to represent her, right? Elects to represent her. Yes, her father, or even her brother, whoever, right? But as long as that there is that Arabic basically formula that's said, it can be said by anybody, right? And it's a very simple one-line formula, right? Just one sentence. But that's all it takes to get yourself married. You don't need a sheikh to do it or anything like that, right? So that's huge, right? Did you have a question? Yeah, for permanent marriage. Even actually for mut'ah, it's the same thing. In mut'ah, actually, you don't even need witnesses. But the whole idea is the same. It's a verbal contract, right?
You don't have to have.
You don't have to have witnesses. Yeah.
Is it still common practice to have a sheikh when you're
A
getting
lot
married?
of places will, yes, but it's more of a cultural thing, and people like to attend wedding ceremonies, and they'll kind of just for the sake of the blessing of.
In America, we don't actually have to have like a whole ceremony of it, but you and your partner can get a certificate that certifies legally you're married. Right?
Yes, right. Yeah, they'll give them like a slip of paper that's
How
uh,
much your dowry was.
yeah, and it's like what we call a nikah certificate, or basically just a statement that yes, this person is now married, and but it's not it's just more of a nicety. Even asking someone to officiate your ceremony, like a sheikh or something like that, that's all just formalities. It's not required by religious law. So what makes uh a relationship legitimate is just words, right? Think about that. That's huge, right? There's so many things in Islam that actually only depend on the words of a person, right? That's what makes you a Muslim. That's what differentiates someone who's not a Muslim from a Muslim, right? Just some words that they say, that they utter, right? Um, so many other examples that we can give that also fall in this purview, but I can give you another example. For instance, when you pray, for instance, right? Your prayers are a set of series of utterances, right? You're saying certain words. Of course, you're doing actions with them in tandem, but there's certain words, right, that you're doing in a certain sequence, and it's almost formulaic. But that's what makes somebody who's, you know, basically adhering to their religious principles separates that person from someone who isn't, right? Just saying certain words, saying certain formulas, right? Think about the Quran itself, a set of utterances, right? That's what makes our religion, right? So that's you can understand the importance of spoken word within religion, right? And that's why even things like, for instance, backbiting, right? Slander. You think about all these vices that we have. Why does, like, for instance, the Quran says it's like eating the flesh of your dead brother, right?
And also in like heaven, there's no lahu, like
Yeah. There's no vain talk,
yeah.
right? Yeah, exactly. That's another. So you see how speech is such an important thing, right? And what you say has such a huge impact. There's even, for instance, certain things actually, casting certain slanders about people in Islam is actually punishable, right? So, for instance, if you accuse a chaste woman of being an adulteress, right? There's actually very strict punishments for that, right? In Islam. In fact, you can be lashed 70 times for something like that.
It's defamation. But
Yeah,
that
it's
is
like defamation. Yeah, it's
It's defamation, but like if I say behind someone's back, but this guy's an
but
idiot.
the idea is that there's a legal principle that if you say something specific, there's repercussions.
yeah.
About speech.
But specifically when it comes to accusing a chaste woman without evidence of being a fornicatress or an adulteress, right? That has a very severe penalty, right? So you can see the importance of your speech within religion, right? So within this, we also get to the question of what we call takfir. You guys know what takfir means?
Like excommunicating people.
Yes. So excommunicating people, calling other people who are saying the kalima, who are saying, la ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, you still accuse them of being disbelievers, right? That has a very big punishment in Islam, right? Because you're basically excommunicating someone who professes to being a to being a
Like that
believer,
guy
right?
Ahmed, when he killed that guy, he was saying that his speech wasn't valid because of the situation or circumstance he was in.
Right.
Because he was on the verge of death, his statement wasn't valid.
Yes, exactly. So I think we were just discussing before. Somebody then could say, well, look at the Pharaoh at very last moment. He said that, oh, I believe in the God of Moses, right? And I believe in the God of the Israelites, right? So does that excuse him? Then is he a believer now? What do you guys think?
Well, in this context, because he's confessing.
Can we call the Pharaoh a disbeliever?
We can't say that, but I think Allah knows ultimately,
Yeah,
like what his
because we don't
heart
know
is.
what's in
Yeah.
his heart. Like,
But he's the best judge. So are we calling any one of the first three a disbeliever?
All of them are.
All of them.
All of these are different types. So we're going to get into what does so now we're going to get into the terminology of what does the word kafir mean within the Islamic context. This is from a lexical standpoint. So like if you went to the dictionary, these are the 4 types of dictionary definitions of of disbeliever that you'll find, right? But I want to get into from a religious standpoint, what are we talking about, right? And we're going to talk about 3 different groups of scholars and what they say about what does kafir mean, right? So, but the same sort of what Brother Sarosh said, you know, we of course, when you look at Pharaoh, yes, if somebody says, I believe at the last minute, at the last moments of their life, right? Um, we have to accept it because we cannot read anyone's heart, right? But if God in the Quran has said that he died a disbeliever, right? Or that God didn't accept his repentance, right? Then God knows the hearts, right? So God knows the intention. So we can say definitively, because God has said that in the Quran, that the Pharaoh, you know, yeah, that the Pharaoh will burn in hellfire, that he certainly didn't believe, you know?
That was mentioned that we're supposed to believe that, oh, now he's a believer.
Yes, right.
Like
Because
maybe if Pharaoh said it in front of us, we were about to kill him. We
yeah,
can't like just kill him.
yeah,
Like back off. Like, okay,
but
maybe
yes.
actions as well. We can't examine their heart. We can just
Yeah, we can go by what we call the zahir, the apparent, right? We cannot go into, you know, their inner thoughts or try to read their intentions. I mean, that's outside of our domain. We're not God, right? We shouldn't play God, right? So that's something super important to understand with this whole discussion, right? So, okay, so now the next point I want to address is, you know, the 3 different groups of scholars that we have, right? So we have in Islam we have what we call mutakallimun. They're theologians, right? Theologians. You guys know what theologians are? Can someone like kind of define that?
Religious scholars?
What was that?
Defining the relation, how you are able to have a relationship, defining the boundaries of your relationship with
Oh, you're looking at like etymology.
No, because theology gets into like aqa'id and like beliefs, like what are the acceptable beliefs.
Right. So theologians are those who study theology, right? Yes. So in particular, you can say, I mean, I think in perhaps in English terminology, when you say theology, you're talking about study of God, right? But we're talking about theologians are those who specialize in religious creed. You know, what is doctrine? Like they're basically doctrinal experts. What defines religious doctrine, right? So, you know, they're a big group called mutakallimun, right? They specialize in that. And now jurists, we call them fuqaha. Can someone define fuqaha for me? Like, yeah, the legal scholars, yes. Okay, so the scholars of Islamic law, right? And then we have mystics. Who are like the mystics? Like urafa, we would call them, right? Urafa, they're kind of people who specialize more in Islamic mysticism, Islamic spirituality, in kind of Islamic ethics. You can say what we call akhlaq, right? They are specialists in that, right? So we have these 3 different groups, and they all, when they say kafir, they mean slightly different things, right? So we're going to go through each group here and talk about what it means, right? So theologians, we have to look at what each group is trying to do, right? What's the goal of each group, and then we can understand what do they mean when they say kafir. So theologians, they're sort of concerned about what guarantees salvation in the hereafter, right? What doctrinal beliefs do you need to have? What is the creed that you need to have to be saved in the hereafter, right? So theologians, it's all about salvation, right? What do you guys think jurists care about? Yeah, they care about law, right? So, law. And what do you think mystics care about? Yeah, you can say spirituality, or you can say ethics. We can say morally, right? Ethics, or what would be a better morality? Maybe, maybe, maybe we can say spirituality. Maybe spirituality. You can say maybe self purification. I think is a better. Yeah, you can say self purification, right? Okay. So, all right. So theologians, we said they're concerned about salvation, right? So when they talk about a kafir, what they're talking about is someone who is not who's basically has deviant doctrine, right? Who has a doctrine that does not guarantee their salvation hereafter, right? A doctrine that basically puts them in peril, right? Puts them in the way of doom in the hereafter, in sort of eternity, right? So so that's what's that? Yes, like being a pagan. So we kind of so
For us as Shia Mutajassimin, like
yeah,
if you, that's a controversial idea of does God have a body?
yes, right.
This is something theologians debate, where like if you believe in the physicality of God, does that make you a Catholic?
Yes, right, exactly. So what we would call it, I would think a better term is what we would call under theologians we would call it al-kufr al-i'tiqadi, right? Al-kufr al-i'tiqadi means sort of doctrinal disbelief, right? Did you have a question?
I was gonna mention what you said. Body. Isn't that a point of difference between Sunni and Shia?
No, I would say that also among Sunnis there's differences. So there are Sunnis that are Mutajassimin and there are Sunnis who are not.
Right.
What is the major consensus among Shia?
I would say that
The Shia are known as Adliya, right? They're known as the Adliya, or they're also known as al-Mu'awwilun, right? Meaning that they do ta'wil, or they basically take many of these attributes. You know what like we're getting kind of into a side discussion, but it's important. So the Mujassima are those who believe that they anthropomorphize God, right? So to say, for instance, God has hands, God has eyes, He has ears, right? And they look at some of these verses in the Quran that say, like for instance, the hand of God, right? Or they say, the eye, that for instance Noah's ark, you know, basically it floated over the water under our eyes, right? There's a verse in the Quran like that. Or that God created the heavens with His hands, right? So they look at these verses and they say, hey, the Quran says God has hands. The Quran says God has a throne. That the Quran says God has a face. So we have to go by what the Quran says. Like, he has these body parts. We can't ask how does he have it? What dimensions are they? We can't really ask that, right? But he has them, right? So this is a big sort of this is a strand amongst Sunni Islam. They believe this, right? Um, but the Shia, we say no. You have to take all these words because you have to. God is not physical. God cannot be physical, right? There's verses in the Quran that say eyes cannot perceive God, right? But God perceives all eyes, right? So there's a very clear verse in the Quran that says that. So God is not visible to the eye, and there's no way that He actually has a physical hand, that He actually has a physical face. In fact, these are metaphors, right? So when God says, uses the word hand, He means power or He means authority, right? Um, when He uses the word eye, for instance, right, He's talking about His supervision, right? When He says face, He's talking about His majesty, for instance, right? So these are all sort of metaphors, but they're not literal. They're not to be taken literally. So we're basically what we call figurativists, right? We take the words and we interpretize them. We don't take them as literal, right? Whereas many of our brothers in Ahlus Sunnah, they do that, right? In terms of understanding some of these verses. So theologians, right? We said they're most concerned about what doctrine guarantees salvation, right? So in particular, when we talk about doctrine, we're talking about three main principles, right? Do you guys know what those are? It's Tawheed. Yes, exactly. Tawheed. And can you guys define these things for me? Tawheed, what's that? Okay. And what's Nubuwa? Right. And then Ma'ad? Right. Good. Yeah. Yeah, it means that there's yes, it means the hereafter, right? That there's a hereafter. So we believe in God, we believe in messengers, right? And then we believe in a day of resurrection. Those are the three fundamental beliefs of a Muslim. This is what makes you a Muslim, right? These three beliefs, right? So that's why when we say, La ilaha illallah, right? There's basically no God except God. We're affirming Tawheed, right? And when we say Muhammadun Rasulullah, right? We're affirming Nubuwah, right? And then just by being a Muslim, right, and accepting Tawheed and Nubuwah, you have to accept what the Prophet came with, right? If you accept the Prophet being a messenger, you automatically, by implication, accept what he came with. And what he came with was a message of salvation for the hereafter, right? So you accept automatically Ma'ad. So those are the three principles that make you a Muslim. Now, if you have any type of doctrinal deviance in any of these three principles, to the theologians, you become a kafir, right? So, then the question is, okay, well, for instance, if we're going to get a little more practical, right? What about Shias calling, let's say Shias, we believe in a special principle, imama, right? So, what do you guys think about imama? Imama is actually a branch of nubuwah, right? It's a offshoot of nubuwah. You can't believe in imama if you don't believe in nubuwah, right? You have to believe in both, right? And nubuwah is kind of the source, right? So the Sunnis, they don't necessarily accept imama, right? So what do you guys think? Do you think we call them kafirs because of that?
Oh, of course not. Because they still.
I'm sure there are some Kafir too.
Yeah,
Oh,
I would say
yeah,
it's probably a spectrum.
yeah,
they are, but they follow the three fundamentals. They follow Tawheed,
I think
Nubuwwah.
it's a spectrum.
yeah. So the thing is, so most scholars still consider them Muslims, right? And those who deem them not Muslims, or they deem them kafirs, they say that they're kafirs in what they call the batini sense, meaning in the hereafter, um, God will not God will not accept their Islam because it had some type of deviation in it, right? And if God does forgive them for their deviance, it's out of His own mercy, right? But their belief was incorrect, right? So that's what that group of scholars says. But they say in this world, we consider them, uh, you know, Muslim, right? Zahiran, they're Muslims. Apparently, we cannot tell them that you're not Muslim because they accept the three fundamental principles: Tawheed, Nubuwah, Ma'ad, right? Those three things that make you a Muslim. Now, there might be certain details that they might dispute with us on, but these are the three fundamentals that we all agree upon. Now, on this frontier, though, there are some groups amongst that would say that they accept these things, that actually most scholars, most Shia scholars in particular, are unanimous that they're still Kafirs, right? Do you guys know which group? No. Khawarij. Khawarij is one group, yes. The Khawarij, we say, even though they claim that they believe these three things, um, they are deviants, and their belief is so deviated that they don't fall under the purview of Muslims. And not just Shia scholars, in fact, even Sunni scholars, majority of them excommunicate the Khawarij, right? Now, I think it's important, though, to point out that there's a group today called the Ibadis, right? The Ibadis are sort of a very no, they're a sort of an evolution of the Khawarij. The Khawarij who existed at the time of Imam Ali, they don't really exist anymore. They've kind of phased themselves out. The Ibadis are a new sort of a evolution of that group, right? And they are still Muslims. They still, most of our scholars accept them still as Muslims, right? So the Khawarij, what was unique about the Khawarij is that they they deemed they specifically. So one thing about the Khawarij is that many of them, they were hufad of the Quran, right? They had memorized the whole Quran. You would look at them and you would think, wow, these guys, they pray so much, they're so pious, right? But there was some major issues in their belief structure, right? And one of the big belief issues that they had was understanding the authority of the Prophet and the authority of his representatives after him, right? So one of the things they said was that um, they had this very famous statement. They said, "La hukma illa lillah," right? That no governance can only be assumed by God, right? They turned to Imam Ali, for instance, and they said, "You committed a mortal sin by trying to go to arbitration when it came to that war between him and Muawiyah. That why did you do that, right? You should have left the decision only up to God. The Quran is basically the source of all of our inspiration. We must go back to the Quran to be our governor, right? They didn't believe in human authority, right? Whereas if you look at the whole principle of nubuwah, it's based on human authority. The whole reason you even accept the Quran is because of the Holy Prophet, right? Um, and having that authority to give you that revelation, right? And having that proof that he is indeed a prophet, right? So that's the gist of where their doctrinal deviance comes from, right? Another group is the Nasibis, right? Who are the Nasibis?
Hate Ahlul Bayt.
Those who hate the Ahlul Bayt, right? But not just those who hate the Ahlul Bayt, right? So this is a very interesting discussion, right? It's those who believe that it's their religious obligation to hate the Ahlul Bayt, right? Yeah. So this is a very interesting discussion because we had there are some scholars, right, who even
Like that definition is very extreme.
yes, but there actually are people who believe that. Yeah, there actually are people who believe that it's their responsibility to hate, for instance, Imam Ali, Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein.
What is their basis for that?
I guess all the Umayyads, I guess they're all lost.
Yeah, many of them were themselves Nawasib, right? Um, but there were some who were not. Like, I'll be honest. There are many of our scholars. There's some of our scholars who have said, for instance, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, they weren't really Nasibis. They were, in fact, the reason they took the rights of the Ahlul Bayt was because they were greedy for worldly power, right? But it wasn't because they were truly Nasibis, right? And this is a view amongst our scholars, right?
They insisted on the allegiance, not even the thought. That meant something too. So it wasn't really the hatred.
Yes, it was more of a we think we are more worthy of this right. It was more of a worldly jealousy type of thing rather than a we sort of do this for the sake of God. We hate you for the sake of God. There are actually people, right, who hated the Ahlul Bayt for the sake of God, right? Or they claimed that they hated them for the sake of God at least, right? So those people are considered completely kafirs according to not just us but even the Sunnis, right? Another group are what we call the ghalis. Do you guys know who the ghalis are? Extremists, right? So extremists, ghulat, yeah. Ghulat is the plural of ghali, right? So ghulat are those people who call, for instance, Imam Ali God, right? Or they ascribe, yes, some Alawis have this type of belief, but
As far as I know, the distinguishment is there's Alawi, there's Alawi.
yes,
Alawi, which is like the Alawi branch, they live primarily in Turkey, who have a more closer to Itna Ashari Shia, closer to 12 Shia. And then Alawis in Syria have a more
what we call Nusayri type of view. Yes,
Nusayri.
yes, they're also known as
They
Nusayris.
come from the founder of Islam.
Yes, that's right.
It's their kind of like a Christianified version of Islam.
Yes, yes, exactly. Yeah, so they actually have many of these very deviant beliefs. So according to most Muslims, they are also deemed a problem because their issues when it comes to Tawheed, for instance, are major problems, right?
What about like the Baha'is or the Druze, like people who add prophets after,
Yeah,
like Ahmadiyya,
yeah,
because that kind of touches on the Buddha. They believe in Prophet Muhammad, but it's the Fatim, like he's not the Fatim.
yeah. So it's also so when it comes to that, it becomes a little bit tricky, right? Because um, technically the Ahmadis, for instance, they say La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, right? They do acknowledge the kalima. They say shahadatain, right? Um, but yes, they have certain deviance when it comes to understanding nubuwah, for instance. And I would say, most of our scholars do deem them outside of the fold of doctrinal kind of orthodoxy, right? They do deem their salvation in the hereafter a problem, right? So in that sense, they would fall under the purview of not being Muslims, being in that group of disbelievers, right? Um, but I think at the same time, it is a very interesting question because even the Baha'is, for instance, they accept the Holy Prophet as a prophet. It's just they have certain extra beliefs about when we call the Khatimiyya, right? So when it comes to this idea of Khatimiyya, right? Khatimiyya means that the Holy Prophet is the last prophet, right? There are some people who do not believe that the Quran actually affirms that, right? They do not believe that this rendering or this reading of Islam is correct. They believe that there is a possibility of more prophets, right? And the Baha'is are one of these groups, right? The Ahmadis are another group, right? So one thing that we can say is if you are convinced that Islam does say that the Holy Prophet is the last prophet, but you still reject that belief and you choose to follow Baha'i Islam, or you choose to follow Ahmadi Islam, right? Or we'll take out the word Islam from there, Baha'ism or Ahmadism, right? If you're going to follow those creeds, even though you acknowledge that the Holy Prophet within Islam is the last prophet, that really for sure makes you a kafir, right? Because you're rejecting the Quran then, right? But if you don't really believe that the Quran actually says that, right? That the Holy Prophet is the last prophet, then it's possible for you to say that this person is not really a kafir because he doesn't actually accept, right, that the Quran says the Holy Prophet is the last one, right? So it's a very nuanced discussion. I'll give you another example on this frontier, right? So, for instance, uh, many of the Ahlul Sunnah, when it comes to the Shia, they say you guys are kuffar, right? Why do they say that? Because they say you hate the Sahaba, right? And the Sahaba are conduits to the Holy Prophet. They tell us who the Prophet was, how did he behave, how did he act, what was his sunnah, right? They're the reason we understand the sunnah of the Prophet. So if you reject the Sahaba, then you have rejected Islam, right? And that as such, you're a kafir, right? But we tell Ahlul Sunnah that we don't accept your premise in the first place, right? We don't accept that the only conduit to understanding the Sunnah of the Prophet is the companions. We have a different conduit. Our conduit is the Ahlul Bayt, right? And we go through them. So based on that, because there's a difference in the premise, right? Um, we're not kafirs. We would only be kafirs if, according to their definition, we only had access to the Quran, we only had access to the Prophet's teachings through the companions, and we rejected them, right? But we have another means of access, right? So that's why this is a very, very important discussion to be had. So even when it comes to the Ahmadis or the Baha'is, I think it's very important to have that discussion with them, and see, do they show them the proofs of why the Holy Prophet is the last messenger, right? And why does the Quran affirm that? And if they acknowledge that, yes, your proof is strong, but we're going to go with our belief, that makes them a kafir, right? So, that's from a theologian standpoint. Did you have another question? Yeah.
I know, like, we don't reject all the companions, right?
Yeah.
It's just a subset that they sort of deem as like the most important. That's what sort of the issue.
Yes. The people who, yeah, well, even the three khulafa, we don't necessarily call them kafirs, right? We call them,
Say that our rejection of them is
yeah.
what takes us outside the fold in their eyes.
Yes, that's true. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's just like hatred or
It's a huge it's a sort of misunderstanding upon misunderstanding, but I think the big problem is that they confound the way that they understand the Prophet's sunnah with the way we understand the Prophet's
how
sunnah,
do we get there?
Yeah, exactly.
I was under the impression that the blanket label, like, at least of like the accusing Shias of being kuffar was because of like, oh, they say, oh, you guys worship Ali, you guys worship Ahlul Bayt,
Yeah.
and then they accuse them of shirk, which is
That's another huge misconception that they have, right? Because we don't worship of course we don't worship them, right? But I think there are certain practices that certain Shia Muslims do that sometimes give off that impression to Ahlul Sunnah. So for instance, not just, I think tawassul not so much. It's more like what we call istighatha. When you actually call out, say, Ya Ali, give me this, Ya Ali, give me that. That to Sunnis is something that's very, very difficult to understand, and they look at that as worship, right? So I think, let me see, where are we with time? Yeah. So maybe I mean I can get into jurists and mystics maybe next time, but it's a very nuanced discussion, Um,
I was gonna ask about like Christians who believe so. If you're they ha- so there's a lot of secular scholars